The coming confrontation between Egypt and Israel. What happens when the cornerstone of Middle Eastern stability begins to crack, not through declaration of war, but through pressure at the border, displacement, and the unraveling of old bargains. For nearly half a century, the peace forged at Camp David has anchored the region, keeping two historic adversaries apart while enabling American influence to thrive. Yet, as Israel's war in Gaza deepens, Egypt finds itself cornered between domestic red lines, regional ambitions, and the weight of international expectations. The question now is not whether Egypt and Israel remain at peace, but how long that peace can bear the strain. Hi, I'm Samia Mohammed, and this is Analytica Today. Since 1979, Egypt and Israel relations have rested on pragmatic foundations. For Cairo, the treaty secured the return of Sinai, economic stability, and American backing. For Israel, it neutralized a formidable rival and opened pathways to Arab normalization. The outcome was coexistence rather than reconciliation, steady, enduring, but always fragile. The fragility is now being tested. Nearly 2 years into Israel's war in Gaza, the specter of Palestinian displacement into Sinai has pushed Egypt to its limit. Cairo has mobilized troops, fortified its border, and declared displacement a red line. For the Egyptian state, the issue is not only humanitarian, but existential, touching on legitimacy, sovereignty, and its role as regional leader. For Israel, Gaza is increasingly seen as territory to be controlled outright, regardless of Egyptian objections. The result is widening gulf between partners whose peace, though intact on paper, is eroding in practice. Red lines and rising tensions, Egypt has made its position unambiguous. Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati has called Israel's campaign genocide in motion and warned that displacement of Palestinians into Sinai is unacceptable. This is more than rhetoric. Egypt has deployed tens of thousands of soldiers, armored units, and air defenses along its eastern frontier, signaling readiness to defend its territory. For Cairo, absorbing refugees would mean importing stability, straining an already fragile economy, and undermining the Palestinian cause itself. The stakes are therefore dual: internal legitimacy at home and leadership credibility across the Arab world. What Egypt frames as humanitarian crisis is also a battle over status and sovereignty. Israel's calculation for its part is pressing ahead with a plan to occupy Gaza in full. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused Egypt of blocking voluntary departures of Palestinians, an accusation Cairo rejects as false. Tel Aviv views control over Gaza as strategic necessity, while Egypt sees it as a trigger for confrontation. The two positions are increasingly inconciliable. Egypt continues to engage in mediation efforts, working with the United States and Qatar to secure ceasefires. Yet repeated failures underscore Cairo's limited leverage, its diplomatic weight weakened by dependency on Washington and constrained by domestic vulnerabilities. Domestic pressures in Cairo for Egyptians. Gaza is not a distant war, but a visceral crisis. Scenes of destruction circulate widely, inflaming public anger against Israel and, by extension, against a government seen as too restrained. Meanwhile, Egypt's economy remains under strain, hit by inflation, currency, devaluation, and rising debt. Political repression has stifled opposition, but Gaza adds combustible fuel to an already tense atmosphere. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi faces a dilemma: act too forcefully and risk confrontation with Israel in the US, act too cautiously and risk losing legitimacy at home. The balancing act grows harder by the day. The American anchor since Camp David, Egypt's security and foreign policy have been tied to American support, billions in aid, and close military cooperation. Washington views Cairo as indispensable, a stabilizer of the Suez Canal, a bulwark against extremism, and a curator of Israel's security. Any rupture with Israel, therefore, carries the risk of rupturing Egypt's lifeline to Washington. For Sisi's government, this constraint is absolute. Cairo can posture, mobilize, and warn, but any direct clash with Israel would place its American partnership in jeopardy. The result is a policy of resistance within limits: strong rhetoric, strong symbolism, but carefully measured action. The Horn of Africa dimension, the Gaza war's ripple effects extend beyond Egypt's immediate neighborhood. In the Horn of Africa, Cairo has built influence in Sudan, Somalia, and Eritrea, seeking to counter Ethiopia and defend its Nile interests. Egypt backs Sudan's national army against the Rapid Support Forces while cultivating ties with Mogadishu and Asmara to maintain leverage in the Red Sea. Above all, it has sought to constrain Ethiopia's management of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, a dispute unresolved after years of negotiations. But this regional posture depends on Egypt's ability to act with confidence abroad. If its alignment with Washington frays under the strain of confrontation with Israel, its leverage in the Horn could diminish, creating space for Ethiopia and others to advance their agendas. The Egypt-Israel peace has long been more fragile than it appeared, rooted in pragmatism, sustained by US aid, and tested by every crisis in Gaza. Today, it stands closer to rupture than at any time in 4 decades. For Egypt, acquiescence to displacement would undercut domestic legitimacy and regional authority. For Israel, pressing forward risks undermining the very peace that has shielded it from border Arab hostility. The immediate danger is not open war, but political fracture, with consequences that extend from the Sinai to the Nile, from Washington to the Horn of Africa. The stakes are unmistakable. If restraint prevails, the peace may yet endure, strained but unbroken. If not, the unraveling of Camp David could reshape not only Egyptian-Israel relations, but the balance of power across the Middle East and Africa. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.